Hi, I'm Robin White from FantasyWire, and I'm the guy that makes the wire fairies. In this section, we're going to be making the wings and attaching them to the fairy. It's worth me adding at this point that I no longer make wings using this method, but I'm showing you this method because it's the only realistic way that you could do it in a DIY form. The way that I do it now, I've actually got a specialist welding equipment and I make effectively my own mesh out of stainless steel and I weld every single joint. But it's extremely expensive equipment and I've adapted it for my own purposes. So it's not practical to show you how to do that. So we're going to stick to how I used to make them, which is still a very attractive and a sustainable way of doing it. So it's just basically making a frame for the wings and then covering it with chicken mesh. The first thing we've got to do is make some wing material. So it's what we make the actual frames of. But I don't quite know how much of that I need until I work out what shape and size the wings are going to be. So an easy way to do it, although I'll have to just adjust the camera to show you this, I'm going to put her on the floor. And what I'm going to do is just draw some approximate wings on the floor. So that looks about the right size for the fairy. So if I just move the fairy out of the way, so all I need to do is sort of measure that. So that's about so we need 24 feet of material to make the wing frames. The wire I'm going to use to make the wing frames is a higher tensile wire. The reason we use high tensile wire is we want the wing frames to look delicate, to be nice and sort of thin, but be strong enough to hold their shape. So they'll flex in the wind, but always return back to the shape. Now this wire is, I think it's about 1.6 mil diameter, but it actually very springy. If I tried to do this with the wire that we were making the fairy with, it would have just bent and wrinkled all over the place. This actually wants to hold its shape. Now, one wire on its own wouldn't be enough for the scale of wing frame that I want. So I'm going to put 3 strands together in exactly the same way as we made the skeleton wire, but with a bit of a neat sort of trick I'll show you. So the first thing I need to do is, we said we needed 24 feet. So I'm from the vise here, I'm going to put a strand in here. I'm going to measure to the cone in the distance, which is about 24 feet, and that'll give me one piece of wing frame big enough to make both pairs of wings. So I'll just reposition the camera so you can sort of see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to measure off 3 lengths. You get all 3 lengths in the vise, making sure that they're all trapped. Very often you'll get 2 that are gripped and 1 that isn't. So they're all trapped. Now I need to measure them so they're all identical lengths. So I'll do them all at the same time. I'll actually reposition the camera. So I'm actually stood at the other side of the room now, and what I'm doing is I've got the 3 strands in the vise at the other side of the room, and I'm pulling them tight so they've all got the same tension on. It's very important that they're all exactly the same length. Right, so what I've done, I'm pulling them all the same tension, and I've made sure that there's no sort of twists in between them, that I can separate them all the way back to the other vise. Right, so they're all gripped tight. What I'm going to do is take my pliers and start the twist by hand. Right, so I've got a twist in the end of the wire, they're all bound together. So what I'm now going to do is put them in a pistol drill. Now if I reposition the camera, what I'm going to do now is just spin. So that's as tight as I dare take it before it goes into a secondary twist. What I'm going to do is make the wing frames, and I'm going to make them in one piece. This is exactly the same way as I sort of described that we do the kits. So what I do with your wing wire, but obviously this is a larger scale. So what I'm going to do is get both ends together and then follow that through till I find the midpoint of the wire and sort of crimp that together. So I've got that loop. So I've got basically two strands the same length. That's going to attach to the back of the fairy. So if we're following this as our sort of design, what I've then got to do is bend this into the shape of the wings. And what you want is it to be relaxed in the right shape. I'm struggling with this twist, but like I say, that's normal. It's just because of the material. So that's a nice sort of shape for the top wing. So what I'm going to do is pass both of these ends through that loop. And then let the wire sort of relax. Grip them both together and double that wire back. I know it looks all floppy and all over the place, but once we put the chicken mesh sort of membranes on, it'll sort of hold its shape quite neatly. So let me just double them back in. So what we've now got to do is form the second pair of wings. So what you then do is trying to avoid getting them the wrong way around. So this is the front one, top one. Pass the end of that back through that loop again. That side of the, and then pass that wire the other side of the wings. And that's sort of essentially, although it looks a right sort of knotted mess at the moment, when I'll put it on the table and sort of flatten it all out, and we'll work on one wing at a time, it'll sort of look right when we've put the membranes on. So we've got our wing frames now, still a little bit sort of messy, but it's just probably worth having a closer look at that sort of joint. So what we've got is the one that's running around here is the original bend where we bent the material in half, and then the wings went out, came back through these two, came over that loop, and then round to start forming the bottom parts of the wings. And then the bottom wings came back up and get passed through the same loop on either side. And these two wires here are the ones that will pass through the fairy to sort of locate the wings in place. So what I want to do now, just before we add the mesh, is to just add a bit of wire around this joint to stop everything moving. So if I just start with, just a random piece of wire just to lock all these together. Just going to twist that up. Then tighten the loops wherever I can get a hold. That should just stop all of them moving, so it just makes it a nice solid piece. So I can now lay them out to start adding some of the mesh. Just give it a bit of a stretch to make it lie flat. Now what I need is a piece just a bit longer than these wings. Just trim some of this off. So what you do is lay the frame over the mesh and sort of pin it down. So get a couple of weights and just sort of hold that in place, making sure that you've got the shape of the wing that you actually want. Now what I'm going to do is cut the mesh to sort of suit the wing, but I have a sort of rule to follow. If you just sort of cut it and left sort of about 1 inch and then folded it over, you'll end up with quite a lot of sort of raggy edge of mesh that you can't sort of get tidy at all, and what you want is it almost to be invisible. So although you've got a bit of movement, I could sort of move this sort of wherever I sort of want to. I'm trying to keep it in the shape of the wing that I want. What I try to do is, let's just start somewhere and sort of cut in towards the wing. You never want to have a full diamond visible on the outside of the frame. So I'm going to trim each of these diamonds, trying to take off the sharp edges, and hopefully you can sort of see that one. So you never have a full diamond on the outside. So that's almost a full diamond, but I'll sort of allow that one because it's not quite full. And you sort of trim the frame, so you're basically following it, following the line of the zigzags, but you've never got a full diamond. And then you can wrap those sort of half and part diamonds round the frame as you go to sort of hold it in place. So it's a bit sort of tricky to keep following, and you get a decision like this one. It's pretty much a full diamond, so I'm actually going to take it back right to the frame and then start on the next one. And I'm rolling this up just so you can see what you're doing. I wouldn't normally, I'd just sort of go around the whole frame. So I'm going to basically trim this all off all the way around, and then we're going to stitch that membrane to this wing frame, and I'll put it on time lapse just because it's going to take me some time. So I've cut out the wing frame and I've wrapped the sort of half diamonds from the mesh around the wing frame. So what I'm going to do now is sew it on. So I've got another piece of wire. It's just a thin piece of wire, and this is approximately sort of 3 times the sort of perimeter of the wing. And I'm going to start from the tip. As always, find the sort of midway point. And just get that nice and tight. And I'm just going to go through every single loop of the chicken mesh and stitch it on. Make sure you go through every single loop. So that's the first wing stitched on. Now what I need to do now is go around looking for sort of loose bits and crimping all of the sharp bits that sort of stick out from the chicken mesh. And wherever you can get the wire that was sewn on, just give it a twist and it sort of tightens it up, because you can't pull it that tight by hand. And it's just go around and tidy it all up. Now I'll finish that up in a minute, but I'll show you the sort of next stage. Now all I'm going to do is repeat this 4 times, but it's worth just showing you how you set up to do the second one. So I'll put my chicken mesh down. What I'm now going to do is lay the second wing onto the chicken mesh, but I'm going to lay the first wing over the top, so I've got a template to make sure that they're both the same size, they're both the same shape, because I don't want to stretch it into a different sort of position. So get that right up there and sort of lay that on there, and just make sure that these follow the same lines, so we get two identical wings. And you just sort of trap that down, and then I'll go around and snip that and fold the wire around the second wing, making sure it matches the first wing exactly. And then I'll do the same for the bottom wings. So I'm just going to stop filming now until I've got all 4 wings done. So I've completed the other 3 wings, so we've now got a set of 4 wings. And I've gone all the way around the perimeter, sort of tapping to make sure it's all nice and tight. And I've grabbed the wire that I've sewn it on with, and I've twisted it to take all the slack out. And I've also gone around looking for all the sort of sharp edges, because chicken mesh is absolutely evil stuff. I don't think I've ever made a set of wings without drawing blood. And just sort of, take the very sharp bits off. Still very sort of plucky, but that's the sort of nature of chicken mesh. So that's a set of wings made. What I'm now going to do before I fasten them to the fairy is put some sort of veins. They're just cosmetic details. So I've got some, this is, again, it's sort of high tensile. It doesn't actually need to be high tensile, but the reason I'm using it is with the high tensile stuff, it holds its shape. If you try to use soft wire when you're sort of threading it through the wing, you tend to put kinks in it, and your eye will see the kink, where it's much more difficult to put a sort of kink in this. So I'll just sort of show you how to do one, and then I'll sort of put it onto time lapse. But basically all I'm going to do, the first one I'm going to do sort of parallel to the top of the wing frame, and then I'll do some nice sort of curly ones to add a bit of detail, and that sort of, it gives you a bit of detail that's close to sort of like a fly wing. I did start to make sort of fly wing details, but there's so many joints in where the veins join, and you can't join it without having a sort of knot. So I've ended up doing just nice curls from one end to the other to get as close as I can, but without any joints. So I'm going to put the first one in. And you don't have to sort of thread it through every one of these loops. It sometimes helps if I just put a bit of a curl just on the end of that, so I can rotate it round. And I'm just going to sort of go roughly sort of, let me cut this off so I'm not wrestling with such a long piece. So I can rotate that round and sort of thread it through, following a nice sort of route through the wing. Just takes a bit of time. Just going through sort of every other one, sort of, you don't have to go through every single. I'm conscious of the line that I'm taking. I want it to be sort of, well, sort of parallel, but get a bit closer at this end, if that makes sense. So that's sort of a nice line through that wing. Just leave enough on that end. Chop this wire off, and then I'm going to just fold. It's actually quite strong, this wire, so it takes a bit of bending around. And just fold that all the way around, so there's no sort of sharp edges. And do the same with this end, although it's slightly trickier because I'm coming at quite an acute angle. So that's the first vein in there. So I'll put it onto time lapse and put the other veins in all of the wings, and then we can attach them to the fairy. So I've put the vanes in the wings. Now what we're going to do is attach the wings to the fairy. So we want the wings to be attached sort of between the shoulder blades, you know, so you get a sort of that sort of effect. Now, what I used to do originally, and what we say you should do with the DIY kits, is to punch a hole right through the center and come out sort of between the boobs. I think that's fine on a DIY kit. On a larger sculpture, I don't like the fact that you get a different texture of wire that you have to sort of hide out the front. So I've sort of developed a different way of doing it. So instead of going through the figure, I'm actually going to go sideways with the two wires that were left and come out under the armpits where that sort of difference in wire is apparent. So now in order to support the wings, I need some of that wing frame to be buried inside the fairy. Otherwise you've got an awful lot of weight just hanging off the back of that. It wouldn't actually support it very nicely at all. So I need to get sort of that block inside the fairy. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a bit violent with the fairy and actually create a gap for that block to go. Use my sort of poking tool. As long as I don't go right through and make a mess on the front, the further I can sort of get in, the better in a way. So there's quite a dent there. You probably can't see it on the camera. Now I want the wires to go almost backwards, so I can't sort of poke a hole from this end. What I've got to do is go from under the armpit where I want it to come out, so I can sort of see that. I've got a slightly sort of bigger bar because I've got to get quite a bit of wire through that gap and just work that hole, pull these wires out of the way. So hopefully you can see the end of that bar coming through there. So I'm going to try to get one of those wires to go backwards up that hole. It's not the easiest thing to do, never mind film. So that's one done. Now try and find a route in from the other side. That one seems to have gone through a little bit sort of easier. So that's sort of all of the structural modifications to the fairy done. What I've got to do now is try and get those wires into position. It's hard to just see where that. Just let me get another tool. Yeah, I can see the other end of that. I'll just try and open it up a little bit at this end just to sort of help me start the wire off. So that one's there, and I've got a dent in that way. Now it actually pays to have these a lot longer than you need. I'm not going to try and sort of lose this wire in the fairy. And the reason you want it longer is it allows me to try and route the wire through those holes before I get anywhere near the wing frames. So let's just, so you go, that one goes straight up there. If I can get this one to go in as easy, I'll be very pleased. Just put a little bit of a curl on that to help me get it started. So there's the wires coming out, and all I've got to do really is make sure I get the wings the right way. Have I got the wings the right way up? Yes, I have. It's just got a twist in it because Obviously, as I get closer to the fairy, I'm having to bend the wire as it goes through those holes, so it becomes a bit of a tussle. There we are. Now if I bend that round. So there we are, I've got that done. Now what I'm going to do now is unravel these wires. Now if you remember, the wing frames are actually made of the sort of higher tensile wire, which means that they're quite strong. Now because I haven't got the wing points very far into the fairy, I need to sort of give this a bit of extra sort of strength. So what I'm going to do is use these wires to come back and sort of try to sew across the shoulder blades, because I don't want to have a big block to support the wings here, so I want to do it as neatly as possible and just use these wires to sort of create some support. And once I get 2 or 3 of them in place, I'll be able to tighten them up, and it will actually create quite a strong little platform to support the wings. So that's that one opened up. So just to give you sort of an idea, what I'm going to do now is use my poking tool, because I don't want to go all the way around the outside and have these ugly big wires. I'm going to poke back through there. So you can see that wire, that tool coming out there. Just take one of these wires through that hole. Hold the wing frames up and give that a good yank. So what I can do now is wrap that round, that single wire, around this side's top wings. I want it to be as tight as possible. So just chop that off. Hold the wing up in place, although it's not going to be strong enough to support it yet. See, already that wing's starting to get some support, and that should be just one wire holding it. So what I'm going to do is just put it on time lapse while I do all of this for all of the wings. I've basically bridged underneath the wings and through the body to get anchor points to create a sort of quite a sturdy platform. But this is the first opportunity I've had since making the wings where I can actually get them to a nice shape, because the twist in the material that you make to make the frames makes them want to sort of curl up, and until you've got them anchored to something, there's no way that you could straighten them out. So what you need to do is sort of twist them quite dramatically right round so they actually stop where you need to be. And this is one of the reasons you put the wings on before the hair, because you sort of need to get into the back to get at it, and you'll damage the hair while you were doing the wings otherwise. So I'm going to tweak them a bit more, but there's no need to do that on camera. So we're sort of getting there. She needs some hair in her skirt now.